Hi, everybody. Um, so today, what I want to start as a topic is um, essentially addressing your marketing section of a business plan. And um, so this is something where um, this may organically kind of happen for you. Plus, if you give it some thought about where you're going to find your clients, is always a worthwhile kind of exercise to do. And you may find over time that you're constantly thinking about where potential clients are and things like that. So I've got a lot of different topics to cover here, but I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about, and then I'll do more specific video content. So first of all, where do you find these people? Where do you find people who are interested in your products or services? Okay. Um, so when I look at the vast majority of businesses that I've worked with, my own business, there are a lot of different ways this can happen, right? So, for instance, if you've got a retail type of establishment, you have sort of some built-in traffic methods, right? Where people, walk by your store or something like that, and they discover you that way. Now, you still may market in other different ways, like in newsletters or in advertisements, social media, blah, 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 blah. You may do all of those things. But a lot of your sales could be foot traffic oriented. Okay. So where you set up shop is a big deal, right? So that can be an important element to consider when you're filling out that portion of your business plan. So when I started my business, uh, you know, what was most daunting, of course, was finding that first bookkeeping client. And I don't have a physical retail store. That's not something I ever wanted. I wanted my business to be virtual. I wanted it to be uh, where I could be anywhere in the world doing what I do. And so if I wanted to live in France for a while, or if I wanted to go in an extended time somewhere else, I could do so. That's what I wanted. That was my ultimate kind of idea for how I wanted to run a business. I didn't want to be physically at somebody's business, honestly, because setting up a bookkeeping business, you can set that up in a number of ways. You could be like a staffing agency where you place people in different um, clients' offices. Um, but I also didn't want to be a staffing agency. I wanted to work with small businesses. And of course, if they want to see me every now and again, that's fine too. I'm fine with that. I don't mind going to their offices and meeting with them and things like that. But I didn't want to have to physically be somewhere ever, right? Um, Unless we just periodically met. Okay. Um, so I did have an idea of kind of how I wanted to run it, etc. Now, my first client, for the most part, I worked virtually. Now, this was prior to COVID. Uh, since then, there hasn't been nearly a focus of me coming into an office setting or anything like that. But my first client did ask for me to do some of that. So I did. Right. Uh, but, you can set up your business any way that you like and kind of approach it any way you like. Okay. So finding that first client, a lot of times it's, talking to people, letting them know that you have this skill, that you have this background, and that you can help small businesses. Because frankly, a lot of small businesses need good help. They need good bookkeeping help. Uh, just like with any business out there, or industry out there, you can find a lot of different players and a lot of different levels of quality, etc. And so I've seen some not so great bookkeepers over time, some who disappear on clients and things like that. Um, and it's just like with CPAs, just because they get licensed doesn't mean they're great, you know. Um, so there's always a variability out there, and you can find a niche for yourself. In fact, sometimes bookkeepers, for example, niche themselves into a certain industry. They will only support certain types of clients, right? Now, I'm open to pretty much serving any industry. There are certain things that we don't do, but I've seen bookkeeping firms that are focused largely on the legal community. They only work with lawyers. Okay. And that's fine, you know, but these are things you have to think about as far as like what you want to do, how you want to set it up, things like that. And then you start hunting for those people. Now, depending on the different kinds of industries that you can be in, um, like for example, we work with a lot of coaching type individuals. Sometimes they do have to be at a physical location because I think some of them do training and like leadership training and things like that. Uh, we also have retail. We've got customer set that is in grocery, right? So clearly that can be done virtually, although Amazon has proven that to be incorrect. Um, but you still have to have warehouse space and you have to have all those things, right? And so your business model and how you want to set up your business is going to largely depend on where you're going to find these people. Like recently, I've seen lots of small businesses start out as just like a hobby that somebody does. Like I recently met a guy um, at a farm around where I live, and he was there and he was selling honey, and he loves honey. He's worked with bees forever, and this has just kind of developed over time. And that's what I have seen most companies do. They start out being this thing that a person is interested in, right? And then it just grows from there. Now, a person can decide to grow big or keep it small, like, right? It's all up to you how you want to do it. But like for instance, he found a way to be able to get into farmers markets and various different places like that where he can sell honey. Okay. I have a friend who started a candle making business. Okay. And so she got a booth at the farmers market at Pike Place in Seattle. Right. There are ways to get that done. Right. And so it requires talking to people, doing some Google research, because oftentimes we can find things on Google about how we get into those types of things. Right. Um, and so, this is sort of a methodical way of being able to find the people that we want to work with. Okay. Now, when you're in retail, it's kind of a wide open thing, in terms of like you're not looking for specific types of people, of course, you're looking for people who are interested in honey or interested in groceries, right? Uh, that type of thing. I also have another person that does jewelry, and so there are people who are looking for that or they want to resell jewelry, in their own store, that type of thing, right? So, sometimes um, where our clientele comes from could be trade shows, it could be things like that, right? So we'll dive into kind of how you go about doing these sorts of things. Sometimes they just happenstance happen to people, right? But it's amazing what happens sometimes when you decide, oh, I'm very interested in this. I want to make this into something. Sometimes that intention will bring information that you've not ever seen before, right? So, and you've seen it, right? Once you start Googling things where you're like, I'm thinking of starting a business in this or starting a business in that, or this is my idea, or where do I find clients and da, 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 right? All of a sudden, articles pop up for you, that you may not have ever thought of before, right? Um, so when I found my first client, it was from a lot of talking to people, right? Because I don't have a retail presence. I don't have somebody who can just walk by a store and see my um, logo on the side of a building or anything like that. So I started talking to people. I started saying, I'm opening this business. I can work with small clients. Um, here's kind of what they look like. This might be the pain point that they might say in a conversation. So keep your ears open for that. Um, And then eventually I got my first client, right? And so that first client then created, now I didn't even think about growing it at all. I was just looking for a client to work with. Okay. I was not thinking big at all, you know. And so essentially when that first client came along, I spent probably a year or so just working with that client, happy as a clam, just doing my thing with that client. Um, and then they started referring people to me. All of a sudden, after about 3 years of working with that client, I had about 9 clients. Now, I got some of those through, I tried, a couple of advertisements, um, and things like that. But mostly it was word of mouth, and largely that's where I get clients is through word of mouth. No matter what I do, no matter what kind of marketing I do, ultimately the clients that I get truly come from word of mouth. Okay. And my networking abilities. Okay. And even if you're introverted, I'm highly introverted. I am not a person that you'll find at parties, talking it up, yakking it up with people. That's just not me. But uh, I totally am fine talking about my business and the value that I can bring to a small business. And so whenever I get on a one-on-one with somebody, you know, whether they're a referral partner or a potential client, I can talk for days about what I do and how I can help people, right? And that's clearly the important thing, right? Is that you help people, you know, especially in a service oriented business. Now, when it comes to products, of course, you want to have a good product, you want to have quality, whatever that means to you, etc. But these are the things you want to think about when building out your idea of how you're going to run your business. Okay. Now, I will have a separate kind of thing where we talk about the business plan and whether you need a business plan or not. But your business plan is really for your thoughts. It's for, here's what I'm thinking of doing. It can change, with how you grow and how you learn, etc. I find personally, I'm a highly educated individual. I've been to school for an undergrad, a graduate degree, and a doctorate degree. Okay, so I've done all of that, right? But I find the ultimate learning module, the ultimate learning university is starting your own business. It is the coolest thing. And so finding that first client, getting those first sales will be crucial to your confidence of being able to uh, do this. Okay, because once you have that first one, it's like, oh, what was I waiting for, right? Because I had for years thought about starting a business, and then uh, it finally happened in my late 40s. So um, anyway, another thing too that you might want to think about, and I'll go into more detail about this, is who are your clientele. Now, this may not apply to certain industries, but in a bookkeeping business, it does. Who are the kind of people you want to work with? And so for instance, I will tell you from a bookkeeping company perspective, your type of client can matter a lot. And largely, like I have worked with some clients that they don't really want to talk to the bookkeeper. They really don't want to have conversations with the bookkeeper. They also don't realize that bookkeepers need to work with a client to establish efficient processes. Okay. Because keeping the books a lot of times is not exactly clean and easy. Okay. Financial software can only go so far sometimes. And so when you are talking to a client, it's like, how open are you to having conversations about how your processes work and how efficient they are, right? Because that can reduce the amount you have to rely on a bookkeeper or how much time they spend on your books. And so sometimes we have found that clients are just not willing to have those conversations, or they're not willing to have some of the harder conversations about, okay, this that you're doing could potentially get you into trouble, right? And a business owner has to be open to those kinds of conversations. So, kind of who is your ideal client? And we'll talk too about kind of why that's important, because it gives other people the ability to find good clients for you. Okay. Um, but also there are ways to get out of contracts. Like I will do some videos on contracts and some of the things that we've done. Basically, at any given point in time, anyone, can get out of a contract with us just as much as we would like to get out of a contract sometimes with them, because sometimes the relationship just doesn't work out. And it's to us, it's a no harm, no foul kind of thing, right? But yes, you do want to have repeat business. You want people to come back every month and work with you on a long ongoing basis, and that type of thing. But like in retail, sometimes you may not have, huge repeat customers, right? It's a slightly different business model, but sometimes these are important things to ask yourself about who they are, what they're doing, because oftentimes it'll give you a clue as to where you need to go to advertise, right? So even if you have a product, you have to think about, where do I find those people, right? So if I were wanting to be a car mechanic, where would I find people interested in cars, right? Maybe it's you are working on maybe just not everyday kinds of cars. Maybe you're working on, or you're looking at like high-end specialty cars or classic cars, right? So where would you find these people interested in classic cars, right? Are there festivals that they go to? Are there, where are the avenues? Do they look at certain magazines, right? So, if you're in that world, you will kind of know, right? And so you jot down these ideas of where you could possibly find them. And what I have often advised people to do is to, start small with some advertising, or, looking at a certain way of finding customers. If it works, great. If it doesn't, drop it, because that's what I've done. I've experimented over time with different avenues of where I find clients and things like that. And there's all kinds of different ways. It's just a matter of your creativity and where you can find these people. Another thing too that you may want to do, and it's something that we've done, especially in the service business, is to come up with a handout, which I'll talk about in more detail a little later. But like our handout is something, it's a PDF, and it kind of talks about who we are, how we came together, how we started, all that kind of stuff, the services that we provide, etc., things that we don't do, right? Because we're not a one-stop shop. We don't offer CPA services at all. So we try to give a potential client an idea of how we help them and how we can work with them. And so this handout becomes really handy with like our referral partners. They always have a copy of this anytime it's updated, and that they can use to introduce us to somebody. So these kinds of things you may want to think about. Now, in terms of another industry outside of bookkeeping, you might have some sort of something that you hand out that is about your products. Who knows, right? Something that you hand out at some event somewhere, where you're handing this out to people. Like if you go to a festival or who knows what, as a marketing place, you have something to hand out to people for them to take home. Or you're at a classic car show and you hand something out, right? So having these kinds of things, having a website, having business cards, having all that sort of stuff, all of these are pretty standard things to do. Okay. And we'll talk about them. But I will tell you, hands down, at least for my business, word of mouth has been the absolute best thing. Okay. And working with and talking to people about who we are, etc., and helping them to know how to talk about us too. Okay. Um, so with this is just a high level kind of landscape of marketing. We'll dive into more deeper levels, more specific levels of this, and I'll share some documents with you, etc. Um, and so it'll give you an idea of how to start thinking about your marketing and how you get that first sale, first client. Okay. All right. So this is exciting. It'll be a lot of fun. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.